Yeah, do a video. Make a commentary. Just mention why we are and everything. Go around it.
All right, so this afternoon, I and my friend Mr. Sakala, all the way from Sheffield, up north of England, we decided to visit one of the graves of one of the legends of nursing. Myself and Mr. Sakala, ourselves being nurses. And I remember from the first day during our nursing training, we learned about, when we did the history of nursing, about a woman known as Florence Nightingale. And Mr. Sakala came to visit me all the way from Sheffield, and we decided to pay some time to remember this legend of nursing. And we spent some afternoon at St. Margaret's Church in Hampshire, just outside the village of Romney, a place called West Wellow, and we visited Florence Nightingale's grave. And here we are. We found it, and exactly the way she would have wanted it done. And for those of you who might remember, Florence Nightingale had wished that she's not buried in a grand kind, she's not given a grand kind of service in Westminster or in other of these grand places, but she just wanted to quietly and silently lie in a peaceful, quiet and humble village of her childhood in Hampshire. And that's where people at that time decided to honor her wishes, and they brought her back home to Hampshire, and that's where she's buried. And so we just took some time to just pay attention to this legend of nursing, and this is what we've been to today with Mr. Sakala.
And is there anything about the church where could it be the church where she worshipped with her family when she lived here? Could you just show us the church, Roger?
I'm not very sure about whether she personally congregated at St. Margaret's Church, but this being her home, and her family lived here for a very long time here in Hampshire, I should assume, and their home is not very far, their original home is not very far from St. Margaret's Church. So I should assume this is part of might be the congregation that her family may have attended. But whether Florence Nightingale herself had been to St. Margaret, was attending a regular attendant or a regular congregant at St. Margaret's, I'm not sure about that. But it's likely it could be that this was a family church.
Yeah. Now, historically, this lady was supposed to be buried at Westminster Abbey in London. Could you try to elaborate more on why she chose to be buried here in a quiet place? And it's a graveyard which is more or less like non-guarded. We came here
very ordinary,
and we came here with just the two of us here. There's no sort of form of protection or
no grandiosity.
Would you try to elaborate what little transpired?
I think that is because of this whole idea of her buried in a simple and humble way, in a very simplest of forms. I think it's so embedded in her passion to save, and a value of servanthood, and a value of compassion, without making too much noise about things, and basically her values of servanthood, which informed her belief and which informed her career in nursing. And I think basically it lies in that. That's where it all comes from. And that's why she decided, even in her death, not to be made grandiose, but to just remain as simple as she lived. And, dedicated to service of the people, dedicated to service of her community, and even foreign community, where she went in to serve in Europe and so on. And to me as a nurse, I think that's quite a challenging stance, and it's really so it's inspirational, to realize that part of what I've become, part of the profession that I've become in this century. I know we lived centuries apart with Florence Nightingale, and I've eventually become part of what she partly pioneered. Those are some of the values that I've stopped and reflect upon and see how well I'm applying those values in my own life, and in my service in the NHS where I work, in caring for the sick, in looking after other people, and not just the sick, but other people in the community. Because as you can see, I should imagine Florence must have been a very community, She had the heart of the community upon her. And that's why she chose to come back to her community where she initially came from and grew up from. And she decided to come and lie there.
As we drove here, first of all, could you explain how the body was transported from Westminster, from London to here? And then as we drove from Romsley to this burial ground, the road seemed to be like a one-lane road, and it's such a significant figure. We would expect the road to be, a proper road, and you'd expect this place to be a very big tourist attraction. Could you say something about that?
Yeah, I think from my understanding, if I'm not mistaken, Florence, I think was after she died, she was laid in state in London. I'm not sure, but it might be in Westminster, where people went and paid their last respects. But because she had chosen, she wanted to go back and be buried in her home county, here in Hampshire, in Romsey, in Wellow. And so after people paid their respects in London and all the formalities were done, she was put on a train. Her coffin was put on the train, which transported her body, her remains from London, central London, into the heart of Hampshire. And I think she arrived at Romsey rail station, an ordinary rail station that we all know, we still use today here in Romsey. And she was from there picked up and brought up to this resting place, which is just a few miles from the main train station in Romsey. And like what Mr. Sakala has alluded to, the road this is a country area. It's a little villages dotted around here, and the place has remained much the same from the way it was during the time Florence Nightingale lived. And they've tried to maintain those values upon her request and upon her will, that she wanted to remain as simple as possible. The value of simplicity, I think it's what I see in everything that has been done. So the road to this place is not very wide and grandiose. It's a very simple country road. It's one-way traffic. You have to wait for the other person if you meet other traffic in front of you to cross paths. And they've maintained that simplicity to her. And even St. Margaret has remained the same old St. Margaret's Church. They haven't made it any grandiose. And even a burial place remains with just ordinary people, the ordinary people of Hampshire, and other people who may have done different things and at different time and in different ways.
Ooh, my friend, could you have a look at this in front here? Could you come in front, Roger?
Yeah. Sure.
Could you see the marking on the graveyard? Front one there. Yeah. Could you say something about that?
There we go again on a tombstone, as we can see. Normally when people, especially well-known figures, have been buried, when you visit their tombstone, there's a lot of inscription and writing that you'd expect to see, and they'll there is expression of what they might have achieved in one or another, and you wouldn't be mistaken not to identify or to recognize that this was a very special person. Yet at Florence Nightingale's grave, her name is not even fully written. They've just put the letters FN. Born 12 May 1820, died 13 August 1910. So nothing much about, the grandiose work that she did, her contribution to the development of nursing as a profession as we know it today. No mention of, her leadership and her pioneering, work that she did when she went out to Crimean in Europe, and whatever she did with other figures like Mary Seiko and other things. Nothing much has been said about that. It's a simple gravestone, and not much is said about her. Just her initials and date of birth and her date of death.
What is so iconic about this lady, F.A.? What is so iconic for those that are new into the nursing profession, or for those that are intending to go into the nursing profession? What is iconic about her?
What's important about Florence Nightingale?
Iconic.
And iconic about Florence.
She is an icon.
Yes, she is an icon because she's part of the person that brought nursing to a profession that we know it today. Initially nursing was done very informally, and it was done haphazardly, and everything was just done without much recognition of what the proud profession that it has become, and we've all become familiar and known about now. Florence Nightingale, with many other, I know there are other people. There's Mary Seiko, there's other pioneering leaders. She's one of those people who brought nursing into a professional, to a profession standard. And most of what nurses are still doing today is part of the work that she pioneered. And, her beliefs and, I talked about her values. One of her values are value of servanthood, a value of simplicity, a value of service to the community, service to mankind, to other mankind. So those are some of the values that informed whatever she did, and along with that, they brought in the modern element of the developing world at that time, so that nursing became recognized as one of the professions and not just something that was left to anyone who could, who was available. Remember, if you go back well in the history of nursing, there was one point where even prison women were used to look after people who were injured in war, people who were sick.
I remember that.
They picked people, from the streets and got them drunk so that they could be able to face up with the atrocities, the traumas that goes with nursing and so on. So she's part of those people who brought that order and that, systematic way of doing nursing, and what we know that now that nursing became a profession, it wasn't just something that was done by people from the streets and people who had no knowledge. She brought in the science of nursing. She's part of the people who brought in the science that is involved in nursing, and most of these principles that she established and her others established are the principles that the nursing profession still cherishes today and still operates upon. Think about a simple thing.
She started the collection of data, statistics in nursing.
Yes.
And all those things.
Research,
and all those things are attributed to Florence Nightingale. Yeah. So what would you say to somebody who is visiting Southampton and they're a nurse? What would you encourage them to do to visit this place? What would you say? Modalities, how can they visit this place? Because this is a very iconic place to visit. And say something about these grounds. They really look serene to me.
Yes, very, very serene place. And You know, there's a real country feeling to everything around you. So to find so Romsey is one of the villages just outside Southampton. You know, the city of Southampton. I know most of the people know Southampton mainly for the Titanic, because the Titanic, you know, started off from Southampton going to Florida in America, and Southampton is mainly known for that. But apart from that, it's got many other iconic and other tourists and places, you know, sacred places, and like where we've just been today at St. Margaret's, which not many people talk and know about. So Southampton is in the south central of the southern part of England. So if you're from London, it's about 40 minutes to an hour into Southampton. Then from Southampton, there are all these other... Southampton is basically surrounded by the country. The New Forest is just by the edge of Southampton, and other cities like Portsmouth, Bournemouth, they are all not very far from Southampton. And like I mentioned, West Wellow is just outside the city of Southampton and Romsey. So to find your way, if you are traveling by public transport, you come in the city center, just get to Romsey. And from Romsey, you can even just get a taxi. Or you can go to the Citizen Advice Bureau. It's a small, little, you know, farming town, Romsey is, but very attractive, and it's got a lot of historic background to it. But if you visit the visitor center there, they've got a lot, and you can ask about Florence Nightingale and they'll direct you. But it's just about like 15 minutes drive, 10 to 15 minutes drive outside Romsey. It's not very far.
Yeah, so as a nurse, having been a nurse for a long time, it's a spiritual connection that you have to this lady, and the values that she instills: compassion, empathy, love, care.
Exactly.
You know, those selfless values
Yeah.
that she instills, the values that anybody would want to be a nurse and is practicing as a nurse in the current state. They still
Apply
the same values.
still values.
And so as a nurse, it gives you that spiritual connection to come to a place where she's rested, and just to have a feel of who was this lady, and what did she stand for. And so that's why we found it very, very important that,
to visit this place.
we should visit this place. It's as much as it is ordinary, and she wanted it to be an ordinary place, but in the true essence of it, Florence Nightingale is an icon of nursing, and I feel every practicing or retired nurse should visit this place and just, you know, pay homage to this lady. You know, as you can see down there, some people even bring flowers, and
there's that legendary side to her,
yeah.
and people come from different parts of the world
to come.
and they come and they leave some tokens by the side, and that kind of thing.
I would. The next thing I would love to is maybe meet her family, and I believe maybe they could still be living somewhere here. But this has been quite a revealing visit, and I thank you, my friend Rogers, for
You're welcome.
according me an opportunity to come here and visit this place.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been one of those things that I've had on my bucket list, so it's ticked out. I visited her graveside, and and that's it, my dear friends. And thank you very much for your time.
So nurses, find your way. We are two nurses from all the way from Zambia. We've traveled miles and miles away to find ourselves in the southern part of England to visit this lady's grave today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.